Good evening, English 315 online students. This is your professor. Pardon my tired appearance, and it is late on a Monday evening, and I want to speak with you briefly, maybe 10 minutes or so, about the reading you're doing this week. That's Thomas More's 1516 book, Utopia. The reading's heavy, and the reading is done via a Broadview supplementary online site. I've provided you with the login information, and I hope you have no problems getting there. It's under Online Selections, Concise Volume A. And this piece, as I said, is very long. I'm okay with you skimming book one, which is nearly 23 pages, and jumping into book two, which is really the gist of it. Book one is divided into these this early moment where Sir Thomas More's faux narrator encounters Raphael, a man who's been to the island of Utopia. You can consider it like a place like Atlantis. And then Raphael becomes the narrator of the adventures in book two, which is really what I'd like you to focus on. Focus on issues of slavery, focus on the arrangement of the cities, focus on their laws, focus on war, religion. You get excerpts from various chapters in book two, and just make your way through that. That's the part that's more important to me. If you want to skim the first part, please do so. I could tell you a little bit about the first part, just to give you a sense of what to expect. It is, in classic terms, a frame narrative. That is book one of Utopia. And it's where our narrator is meeting Peter Giles, a real friend of Thomas More in real life in Belgium. And not coincidentally, it ends with them in a garden where they're going to reshape or rethink humanity. And it is a metaphor for the Garden of Eden story from the Bible. And so this idea of reshaping the world to a perfect place, utopia, should coincide in your mind with something that is perfect, of reaching towards perfection. And but book one is basically just a debate. It's a debate where we start to see the mouthpiece of Thomas More through Raphael and through his narrator kind of come to life and speak through this dialogue that a bunch of intellectuals and priests are having. You'll want to note, if you don't read book one carefully, some of the laws that are discussed at the beginning. And the persons who are the objects of critique, that is the priesthood, right? Even though Sir Thomas More is a Christian, he's certainly using the priesthood as an object of satire and critique, including the cardinal sitting with him. But the early point is on thievery and the idea that whether one should mete out a punishment that is particularly harsh to get rid of the intention of thievery. And you have to remember that's 1516. So our definitions of economic capital, like socialism, I don't know, communism, capitalism, don't really have much currency at the time. But the debate is, does just one get rid of the social condition through of thievery through a strict punishment, or as being discussed here, something a little bit more lenient, and that takes into account the social conditions that created the thievery. There's discussion of capital punishment. That's one of the reasons I find this book so enticing. The debate whether capital punishment is an ethical thing to do. In 1516, that is a landmark thing to discuss. And if you're wondering what the book is, book two then becomes, as I mentioned, Raphael Hithloday, this fake guy he meets who's been there to Utopia, um, is going to give you a rundown, much like in sci-fi novels or sci-fi films. A person goes to a foreign land and encounters new people, or a travel writer, right, going to a different place and reporting back to the culture as a whole. Um, Raphael today does that, and then the rest of the book is that particular place. The island, it's an island of Utopia. It has a natural military barrier that ships cannot get into, as you'll see when you read for book two. So book one, as I said, frame narrative, it will slow you down. It will bog you down. You don't have to read every single page. It will provide a sense of more setting up the argument as a discussion between gentlemen, and with his friend Peter Giles in Belgium, and ending with, as I said, the Garden of Eden where they're sitting, and Hithloday starts his narrative. That begins book two. The reason, before I mention a couple more things about book two, the reason I assigned this piece, and pardon me for working retroactively from Renaissance writing from the 1600s back to the early 1500s, I want to give you something that informed the thinking of much of the writing that we're doing, is that the term utopia is such prevalence in contemporary culture. One of the essay prompts I ask you about is dystopia, a hellish word, but the idea of a utopian society, that is basically what the university system is based upon, creating a perfect world through the spread of knowledge. The university that you're in now, um, and there's this idea that this notion of utopia, it comes into contemporary film, whether we want to think of dystopian films about the future, such as The Terminator or even The Maze Runner, those books that came out. Worlds where society is owned by quite a few people, and and the goal is to get freedom for those who are oppressed. Um, if you think of Moore's world, there are elements of dystopia in it. But the reason I assign this to you is because it is a highly influential idea. It is one of the founding ideals of the American experiment. I teach early American literature, and utopian ideals are embedded within that. And B, it's a kind of Renaissance ideal being started. The idea that becoming this perfect human or perfect self through science and knowledge and education at the time, that the human species was evolving and becoming better. And C, as I said, much of our society in the West is based upon a utopian ideal. I mentioned the American democratic ideal, democratic experiment, but utopian is a founding ideal of much of Western culture, and it has a lot of resonance in it. Let me tell you a little bit about book two, and then let you go so you can start reading. And again, I apologize for the great deal amount of reading. I think you're going to enjoy it once you get to book two. I think book one is going to be a slog. But a couple things regarding book two. So if you look at your book, it's about the online edition is about 53 pages, right? I'm going to pull it up as I'm talking to you. I'm looking on page 23 and 22, roughly at the beginning of chapter two. And Moore writes that, quote, the island of Utopia extends in the center, where it is broadest, for 200 miles. And this breadth continues for the greater part of the island, but towards both ends, it begins gradually to taper. Um, he actually provides a geographic coordinate for it. He creates this fake world. This is imaginative writing. This is maybe early sci-fi writing, and he's describing the island itself, which of course seems to be England and the UK, which is an island as well. So you got this idea. There's not too much hidden subtext here in terms of the place that he's recreating. It seemingly is a political critique of England at the time. Moore eventually gets beheaded by King Henry VIII for opposing some of his religious policies. Moore is critiquing an English society that has the many suffering under relative poverty and the few having concentrated amounts of wealth. I don't want to make the leap to contemporary society, but I'll let you be the judge if that's the case. But there's this idea that, going back to the landmass, that all the lands and all the islands are going to be created equally. It's a social arrangement, and their city that he uses as an example is called Amuro, Amurot, sometimes with an E at the end. And Amuro has like a wall, or a kind of a, I don't know, a circular part of it, not a circle around it, and it has a stream that goes down so people can get fresh water. There are separate quarters for some of the quasi rulers, the transibors, but the idea is that the island has the same cities everywhere. Baton Rouge would be the same as New Orleans, would be the same as Thibodeau. Same population, a loose set of rulers. It's highly, highly democratic with a lowercase d. And if you want to make the leap that it's socialist, you can. But it's basically the ideal. If you create everything equally, then people will live equally. If you create the housing units equally, they will live equally. There are lovely parts of this island. There are free hospitals available for the poor. There's not an economic system of exchange. Food is given from markets where individuals will go get it and bring it back to their areas, and then it's distributed equally. There's a set amount of work each day, but there's no person with a whip watching you. You work voluntarily because you believe in the utopian society, and that's one of the essay prompts too, that you have to pretend you believe in it, and you're justifying it to an imaginative audience. So there are lots of really nice things about this island, if I might say my own opinion on it. Um, there is not any type of stealing. There's no starvation. Everyone changes houses every several years. I think it's 10 or 8 years. So there's not it's someone living in a rich house and someone living in a poor house. Um, there is slavery, and there is implied forced religion. Those are two things that aren't really utopian. Um, but when he means slavery, he means people captured in war, and they'll try to avoid war by any means necessary. Though they are military ready, and they're on an island, so they can avoid war. They don't get involved with foreign wars. That's one of Moore's, excuse me, Thomas More's greatest gripes is that England is going to war too much. So he's very libertarian, I guess, to use a modern term in that respect. He doesn't want England going into foreign conflict. Therefore, utopia is a place that they avoid war, and they'll use intellectual warfare. They'll try to get the other side to surrender beforehand. They'll have these. The last chapters are long, and the description of wars that they'll put brother next to brother in order to fight together, and be better at that. Once again, this is an anti-war society. The thing about slavery, and that will be maybe the next to last thing I'll mention, these aren't slaves in the sense of they're kept in chains. They wear different clothing. They wear gold. Gold is viewed as something of an impediment there, or a negative trait. He wants a world without material wealth. I admire Moore's materialism, and slaves are people who are caught from other wars, who are given time of indenture, if that's the right term, and they can have that time. They can move relatively freely about. They would have to get a travel pass. They are not whipped. They are not hurt. They are in semi chains. They do wear the gold. So it's not slaves as you and I would think of such a negative way of looking at the term. I guess the other things I would say is look for the social arrangement. We can't imagine a society in 1516 being egalitarian towards lesbian and gays, but there is a distinct social arrangement that gestures towards equality in the male-female household. There is marriage. There's a weird marital ritual that involves looking at the other person naked before marrying, and Moore says he says it's like looking at a colt or horse to make sure you're not getting damaged goods. So again, it's very, very forward thinking, but it will also have its limitations on gender equality and things like that, and certainly slavery and Christianity is not enforced. The pagans who are live there seemingly have been found the true God with a capital G, but it is all but enforced in this culture. So again, it's a society that I think you're going to find very interesting. And keep in mind, it's fake reporting in book 2. Book 1, long-winded. You'll make your way through it. The Peter Giles episodes. It kind of ends on this open note, and you realize that more seemingly there's a debate whether this is an elaborate joke on us as an audience. I don't think it is. I think more serious in terms of creating a world that he believes would be better. And if he's looking outside and seeing people with no sanitation system and dumping feces out the top floor window and intense poverty, why not imagine a better world for people? And it shows the power of fiction. It shows the power of writing that he helped create and instantiate some of the ideas towards perfection that we're still working on in 2019. So I'll leave it there. Good luck with more, and thank you for listening. Bye.